Good
Hello
morning.
there.
How are you?
Good, thank you. And Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Lovely to
Good
see you
morning.
both. Hey, Fatih.
New Year.
Hi there.
Jeez.
Uh,
All right, I have a oh, no, I don't. It just got canceled. I was gonna have to cut out early. Sweet. All right. So maybe we don't need the whole hour. Hang on. Did you guys do anything interesting over the holidays?
I saw sun. No,
You
in
saw sun?
Sweden. Yeah,
Oh,
in Sweden. We don't see sun very often in December, January. So that was a good thing for me. I went to a place which has more sun, or sun, not more sun.
where did you go?
Gran Canaria, it's a popular destination for Swedish people. This was first time we went there. It was
That's
like
off-
awesome.
That's off the coast of Africa.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
okay.
west of Africa. It was really good, but we had this sandstorm. Yeah, there was a sandstorm there 3 days, so we couldn't see the sun for those 3 days because it was like covered. The sky was covered with sun. Sand. But rest of the week was pretty sunny.
A friend of mine's family's from the Azores, which is also somewhere down there. But what about you, Terry? Did you do anything fun?
Been building hardware at this end.
Ooh. Do you have more videos that are coming out?
Yeah, good, possibly. But I've been building some analog synthesizer modules. So lots of tiny little surface mount components to solder up.
I admire people who can do that. I have never quite gotten the hang of it. All right, what do we have here? CDCon and GitOpsCon. Call for papers is now open. Is this you, Fatih, or who added this?
Yeah, I added those first 3 topics. So yeah, we have been working on organizing this event for quite some time, and we finally managed to open up the CFP. This event is co-organized by CDF and CNCF to bring these like CDF projects, community end users, vendors together with the GitOps community users, projects, and end users from CNCF. And it is actually co-located with the Open Source Summit as well. So because like when we talk to people, we hear things like CD, GitOps, supply chain security. How can we have all these things discussed in one place? And then we took the opportunity of Open Source Summit and then put the event there together with the NCF, because Supply Chain Security Con is happening within Open Source Summit as well on Wednesday, May 10th. So this event is getting a lot of interest from people. So, and I just put the link there in case if you want to submit talks on CD or GitOps or supply chain, so we can have a good event here.
I will social media that as well.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
Awesome. All right.
Is that going to be in-person talks only this year?
Yeah, that we haven't finalized that, but it looks like it will be in person. Finally, the LF, like I think, is making the switch to full in-person events. So it remains to be seen. Still, we can discuss this for Silicon and GitOpsCon, but yeah, it will most likely be in person only.
Just so you know, the link that you shared says that the call for papers is
Oh, yeah.
TBD.
Oh, let me put the direct link to call for papers as well, the website. Oh, I put the wrong link, sorry.
You're fired.
So CFP link, I'm just adding it to the CFP link. Feeling.
Oh, the other was a blog. Okay, there we go. That looks
Yeah,
better.
and I put the wrong link.
The blog.
Post as well. Yeah. Yeah. So, and we have program committee determined as well. So yeah, we are basically ready to accept the talks and review the talks, and we will have the early bird selection coming up in a week or something.
Perfect, because I'm still finalizing my budget. All right, thank you. What's this next one? Mainframe.
So
Ooh.
I met with program managers, Open Mainframe project program manager. He actually reached out to me, John Martich, and he said that they have been having some discussions within Open Main projects to, have some continuous delivery for mainframes, like some modernization efforts and so on. And it looks like there are interested people within the project as well from Broadcom and IBM and perhaps others. And he asked if we have any interest as CDF community to collaborate with them. And I said, like, best practices SIG could be a good place to start this discussion, because like the best practices we have within our community, determined within our community, may be applicable to mainframe as well. Not 100% perhaps, but high percentage of it. And as we were discussing, we said how we can, make this potential collaboration visible and attract more contributors to both the CDF itself or the Open Mainframe modernization efforts. One idea is to look for possibility to co-author a white paper specific to mainframes, continuously for mainframes. So this is just an idea. I want to hear your opinions. And if you would be interested to have a call with John Martich and maybe a few others from Open Mainframe project to see what opportunities are there, and if it is possible to write some kind of white paper to make some noise.
I don't see why not. It's fascinating to me how mainframes are a thing again. Like at my new company, we have to support them. I was like, what? What is this? 1994? Come on now. But IBM is like with their whole Z series, and there's all kinds of stuff going on in that space. So yeah, did you tell them to come here, or did you want to set up an email?
No, yeah, if you and Terry, you are interested, I can set up a meeting with John Martich, the program manager from Open Mainframe, and he can bring 2-3 people from Open Mainframe project. We can have this smaller discussion to see like how we can collaborate. And then during that discussion, we can say maybe we can use best practice SIG as the place to start this collaboration and so on, and vice versa, if they have some other ideas. So just have some initial kickoff meeting to discuss the idea, and then based on what comes out from that discussion, start doing stuff together, perhaps.
Okay.
It's good to me.
Okay. Then I will start a mail thread with John, and then we'll see when we can set up this discussion.
Okay.
And Tara, I don't think I have your email address, the new one. Maybe I might have the old one, but the new one.
Oh, yeah, here, I'll just drop it in the Zoom chat.
Oh, yeah, Gmail. Yeah, I think I have that one. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I had to switch it from my old Google account. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't get rid of that email address. I've had it for too long, but man, I'm too old for that. Like I was so in my 20s back then. Okay. CD reference architecture workshop. Oh, great. So last time we were talking about identifying some nerds to actually implement something, because we didn't seem to have one that we could just pirate. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, the reason I added this topic is because I talk with many people. I point them to best practice SIG. I mention the reference architecture to them. And some of those people, they know how the communities work and so on. And they join the meetings time to time. And some of those people, they are not very used to joining the community meetings. They are pretty new to doing these things in this way, but they are interested in the topic reference architecture. And while I was discussing with someone, maybe I think we discussed this, Terry, two of us as well. We said maybe we can have a longer discussion focused on reference architecture, talking about what reference architecture means in continuous derivative context, the difference between reference architecture and implementation, and what are the ways people could contribute and have an open conversation with interested people. So it's like just focused on reference architecture, and I can then reach out to those people I've been trying to bring to this SIG and say, this workshop is happening, this is your time to come and share your ideas and hear what others think, so we can hopefully keep them engaged going forward. Because we tried many different things, but it looks like people are still hesitant to contribute. So that's kind of an idea, like, can we have, or does it make sense to have this 2 hours workshop end of February or something, beginning of March, to get everyone together and start talking and perhaps doing some work around this?
I mean, my concern in this area is that what needs to be done at the moment isn't really amenable to a discussion group. What needs to happen for the next phase of development of the architecture is some people to knuckle down and actually start writing the content for the next phase. And that's not really a workshop activity. That's much more a case of people taking their experiences and getting them on paper so that we can capture and publish those. I think the phase that we need to get into next is building the business case for continuous delivery. So that would be the next phase within the TOGAF architecture structure, would be to spell out the reasons for doing continuous delivery, the commercial advantages to doing that, and then helping people to understand where to look for gaps between where they are currently and where they need to be from a commercial perspective, in order to then engage in the technical and systems infrastructure pieces that they need in order to actually implement.
I don't want to start my sentence with but Perry, now like we discussed this a few times before as well. When I talk to different people, some people are very much in favor of looking at things from that perspective, but some people want to contribute or willing to contribute in a more practical manner. For example, Justin, there was a thread on Slack as well. He shared his concern, the way he wants to contribute, or he could contribute this work. And then he didn't do that, but he went and wrote a blog post and published on his own personal website. So my concern is how you can bring people with willingness to contribute, but trying to take a different approach together, to start discussing, saying that, okay, if you want to contribute, you can take a bottom-up approach, and then other people could do the other way, and then at the end we can combine our efforts. Because let me put the link to chat. I don't know if you've seen his post. He actually wrote this post around August, but he hasn't been joining conversations. He just sent a blog post saying attempt at defining ideal pipeline, referring to reference architecture and so on. So it makes me feel like we have to bring practitioners, engineers to this discussion as well. Otherwise, we may fail attracting the community members who are actually developing these things, or the practitioners who are actually building pipelines for their organizations.
Yeah, so these pieces, you know, we already have a structure for this stuff. The existing best practices website has a whole section dedicated to hosting, you know, these types of white paper describing individual techniques and, you know, detailed use cases, which has been open for a couple of years now. And, you know, Justin was one of those people who we set this up for because he wanted to do this. But in the end, he didn't contribute it to us, and you know, clearly he's decided to publish it elsewhere. Now, that's a big piece of the work that we're still needing to encourage, is getting people to contribute those individual, you know, the use cases, the white papers, the examples of how to do this stuff with a particular technology or a particular project, which we're more than happy to host and facilitate in that space. But the challenge is that it does require people to actually sit down and write this stuff down. And that's the bit that we can't help with. You know, at some point you've got to actually put this stuff in words and contribute it. And that doesn't come from a workshop. That comes from somebody just sitting down and plowing through and writing the document, and then, you know, giving us a PR that we can then review and publish. And you know, this is where we've got this ongoing engagement problem, that people are quite happy to come and have a conversation, but we're struggling to get anyone to actually contribute any content now. And we seem to have lost most of the contributors who were previously generating content in this space.
Related to this, and this is, you know, I've had a couple of conversations with folks, because one of the ideas we also had way back when on the reference implementation is, you know, can we take the existing projects, you know, say Tecton, for example, and there seems to be a hesitancy for people holding up their stuff as any kind of example. Maybe because they feel like, you know, it's missing too many of the best practices, because inevitably most pipelines are not perfect, right? And it's sort of a do as I say, not as I do scenario. And that's also been kind of a hard sort of mental block to overcome. I'm wondering, I mean, do we just, could we just use them anyway? And like take, or even in snippets and break them out? Or, you know, do we really need to get the project's buy-in in order to use their systems as more working examples?
Isn't it the next step, really, the project pieces? Like, if I refer back to Justin's post, like the way he described his ideal pipeline is like certain activities and checks and so on. And then he provided examples, oh, you can do this with open policy agents or JMeter test. So, because if we start talking about implementation and start talking about individual projects, we may lose the contributors to other projects and other organizations who may not be using non-referred projects. So starting with this, creating a simple diagram with boxes with these activities like commit checks and unit tests. And I know these things exist under best practice, but putting some kind of visual form and calling it reference architecture, just making things up by the way. And then once people see, oh, this looks great, but you missed this. Oh, by the way, you can do these things with Tecton already. Here is how we implement this thing that came out from these discussions. And others like Jenkins, Spinnaker folks could say, oh, you can do the same thing with our project as well. So they do the implementations rather than
but
like.
Right. I hear what you're saying, but what they're not doing is actually doing any of that. Going back to Terry's point, right? So if as an organization, if we want to be able to really provide a body of work that is going to be compelling, especially to the range of people that we're trying to engage with, right? I don't know how, I mean, right now it's completely distributed. Tecton has tecton.dev, right? They don't talk about best practices in the way that we do the central format, but they talk about how they, how do you set your stuff up, right? In theory, if they wanted, which they have not indicated any interest in doing, in theory, we could take that and mark it up like, okay, here's an example of some of these principles. Here's an example of an implementation in a Tecton pipeline. Here's an example of an implementation in a Jenkins X pipeline, right? We could do that. But we'd either need the projects to be willing to consider this part of their participation as far as, good citizens of the CDF, or we have to think about how do we get this content anyway? Because Justin Abrams came in here and had all these ideas and wanted to talk about eBay's process and the things that are going on, and then he disappeared. And because when push came to shove, he didn't really want to publish his stuff, and probably his lawyers didn't want him to publish their stuff because companies are like that, right? So I feel like we have a little bit of a catch-22 here. Is I think the challenge.
Yeah, and the other piece I think is really important to be mindful of is that we need to separate out the general best practices stuff, which is already structured and in place, and it's free for people to contribute at any time to, and then the reference architecture, because architecture has a very specific formal meaning. And so it isn't a bucket in which we just chuck examples of how people have done stuff. An architecture is a formal approach that says, here's a problem, here are the factors that contribute to that problem, here are the things you must consider in your design process, and then here are the ways you can get to a solution. But it never mandates what that solution looks like. It's the set of thinking rules that say, here's the heuristics that you need to keep in mind to get you on the path to a successful solution. So in developing the reference architecture, we need to follow that methodology and work through the steps of doing that. Now, where we are at the moment is we got stuck because we didn't have any contributors at the time who had the relevant experience, who could give us the benefit of their knowledge in expanding on the commercial aspects of that. Now, obviously, Tara and I can write a chunk of that, but ideally what we wanted to do was expand the scope of the group and bring in some more people who do have relevant experience and can contribute at that level. So on the reference architecture piece, that's where we're bottlenecked at the moment, is in getting some people who can understand the business case for continuous delivery and help to communicate the risks and challenges associated with that phase of the problem. And I think that is actually probably the most important value add that we can deliver through that reference architecture, because it's the bit that's invisible to everyone, and that you only get by making mistakes when you go through the process the first time around. It's a big barrier to entry for anyone trying to pitch continuous delivery into their organization, because there's no good use cases out there to really support that argument.
That's one of the reasons why I thought about this idea, calling it workshop kind of thing, so we can make a noise saying that people, this is happening here, bring your product managers, CTOs, or whoever to this. This is your chance to learn more about this effort, how you can contribute. Because like you have been passing the word about SIG. I've been passing the word about SIG. I talked to 20 or even more people, but those people I fail to see them here, because when we call it SIG, when we call it community meeting, it happens bi-weekly basis. People, they're not used to doing that way, especially product managers or the people who are not engaged in the community.
Right.
So,
Are you thinking
again,
about,
yeah.
I mean, if, I guess, are you thinking about a more targeted approach rather than having, because I think the big thing is getting the right people engaged. And so that
Yeah.
feels like we have solicited and gotten and are arranging a more specific engagement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So because like, I think the last meeting before Christmas, I think we had people from like Fujitsu, Octopus Deploy, and those are some of the people I talked about best practice SIG and reference architecture, and they all shown interest and they joined. But again, the wording, like when we all want them to join the community, but sometimes it's too much for some people. It's like if you could target them saying this is happening, and then Terry, the summary you provide, like, or Tara, the ideas you shared, they can hear these things to specific meeting. They may say, oh, I can contribute this, and we action them at that moment, just talk about these things. And that is another
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
attempt.
we've certainly invited that. If you can help bring that to more concrete fruition, that would be amazing.
And then we have these like FOSDEM talks coming up. I was talking with Lori, for example. We have a talk there specifically talking about best practice and reference architecture. And we would want to talk about this, like, oh, we are having a workshop, for example. It's like we are really trying different ways to bring more people to our community and the best practice SIG. But again, just I don't want to repeat what I said. It is difficult for some people.
I mean, the only challenge for me is my schedule is pretty gruesome. But so that might be, that's going to be harder for me, especially some on the West Coast, but I'm certainly open to try.
Yeah, we can, like, what we can do is like, we can take one of the upcoming best practice SIG meeting, end of February, March. We call it the workshop, and we extend it to 2 hours. It starts at the same time as the regular meeting time. And if we don't need to use 2 hours, then we don't use it. We just end the meeting regular time. But at least we have a place with a certain reason, with, you know, invited people to show up and discuss these things. If we don't get anyone, then we know we need to do this a different way.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that concept. Okay. So what do you want the next step to be?
You can check the calendar, Google Calendar, like, and see, just let me see, March. I see there is a best practice SIG meeting on March 8th. Maybe we can say that date could be the date for this workshop. And I can start sending mails to people. We can start talking about this in our talks, and we can write a blog post, a follow-up blog post. Terry, you published September saying that this workshop is happening, and we make noise and see who shows up.
Okay.
I know. Please let me know if I am thinking wrong. Well, I really want.
Well, I mean,
this is an important work.
No, I think Terry and I are just like, you know, we try to do this with the birds of a feather talks. Yeah, there's some kind of wall we have to somehow break through here on this. So but sure, I mean, I think you putting more attention on it can only help. You have cachet, you know, so this might help. Hello, I see that I'm going to probably terribly mispronounce your name, Leora.
Yes, you didn't mispronounce exactly.
Oh my God, I got lucky. All right, welcome to our little tirade. I see that you are from Red Hat. What is your role at Red Hat?
I'm a DevOps architect.
Oh, God bless you.
Well, I'm already known in CDF, and I'm actually reappearing after a long time that I wasn't here, and I was working with Fatih, right? Fatih, I'm hoping that
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
mispronouncing your name.
It's correct.
On a different SIG, and I was just joining in today just to see what the discussion is all about of the best practices. I'm hoping that I'm not interfering, so I'm just here to listen for now.
Not at all.
Your skills are very welcome here. We're right now, people with architecture experience are just what we need to help move things forward.
With pleasure.
Here, let
So,
me.
do you want to describe to give me the context, because I've missed part of the discussion? So
Yeah, so one of the pieces of work that we're engaged in at the moment is a reference architecture for continuous delivery.
Be
And
published along with our site that I'm going to give you a link here. Sorry, Terry, keep going.
yeah, so we're a double act here. The problem that we're seeing in general is that you've got two groups of potential customers. You've got the large organizations like your Googles and your Netflixes, who are already deeply involved with continuous delivery as a methodology, and who wouldn't think about doing anything any other way. And then you've got the rest of the world who really have almost no exposure to the drivers that sit behind all the decisions within that first group. And so what we're seeing is people who are so used to doing continuous delivery that they're like fish in water. They're unaware of the water that drives the processes that they're using. So they find it quite hard to describe why they do continuous delivery and what the decision-making processes are. And in the other camp, they can see the behaviors that are the outcomes of what's going on in those organizations, but they can't see any of the commercial drivers or the decision-making processes. And so they tend to get the cargo cult problem of replicating the outputs rather than understanding the outcomes. So what we're trying to do with this architecture is just walk through a standard TOGAF process of describing what the commercial problem is that would lead you to using this as a methodology and approach, and then what the key drivers and constraints are in understanding that process, and then teaching all of the important decision-making concepts that you need in order to first evaluate whether it's an appropriate methodology for your problem space. And then secondly, understand what thinking processes need to go on to make the decisions about which tools and which parts of this to adopt first, and what practices are appropriate for the problem that you're trying to solve within an organization. So we've got the first part of that done and published already, but we're at the business architecture phase of TOGAF, where we need to dig in and say, right, what's the business case? Let's put together some examples of an organization where this would be an appropriate methodology, and then spell out the challenges that they're facing and how applying the methodology helps them to address that. And also give them some tools to evaluate the gaps between where they might be at the start of the process and where they need to be before they move on to the systems and technology parts of their architecture decision process.
I might have some dumb questions. I'm sorry. apologies for that
There,
upfront.
there are never
So-
dumb questions.
There are never
I
dumb
know.
questions.
I always tell that to my students, but I'm apologizing upfront because again, I appreciate Terry for providing me the context, but I don't see the full picture yet. Maybe it's my English, maybe, I don't know. But so I will ask some questions to see that I'm getting it right, if that's okay.
Oh, that's
Sure.
perfect, actually, because we've been talking to each other for months. So fresh voice.
Okay, so first of all, in my understanding, do we want to, like, what is the context? Like, what is the right term? Because I'm a little bit confused. Do we talk about continuous deployment or continuous delivery? Because those are not the same thing from my point of view.
Bless you.
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question, and one of the important things that we defined early on in this process. So the standard terminology that we use within the CDF is that continuous delivery is the overarching methodology. And if you talk about continuous deployment, then you can consider that as a narrower step within a pipeline process. And so a component part of the overarching methodology. But we take a very broad view of continuous delivery as not a engineering specific technique, but rather a commercial methodology for effectively delivering product. And so our discussion in best practices often stretches a long way outside of the engineering domain to look upstream into the decision-making processes about defining a product and experimenting with customers as part of the driver for needing this very rapid continuous delivery loop. And then also downstream of engineering, the impact of that on customer in production and how you get good information from live customer interactions back into your engineering and decision-making process.
So I don't want to derail the discussion, so I'll just give you a comment here. I think that because the industry that we are part of has so many terms and best practices and cultures, and the terminology is like huge. You need a huge vocabulary to understand what's going on, and I think that redefining the terms that the industry is using to something else might backlash at us.
Well,
And
So we're not redefining. What we're doing is spelling out what the broad usage of these terms actually is in industry, and we're finding that in some organizations people use those terms the other way around, but the consensus view that led us to our decision-making process on the definition brought us to this overarching definition. But it's probably easier to understand that in context. So you'll find it's those definitions of terms are part of the best practices site, and we help to spell that out.
And it should be in alignment with what the CDF defines, which is currently being tracked here.
I will take a look, but again, I don't want this discussion to be on that topic. I'm just saying that if we are eventually generating, if I'm not mistaken, we want to lead like how the industry should, like which kind of policies, practices, frameworks the industry not need, but we suggest the industry to adapt, right? So first thing that someone in a specific industry will try to find our information, he will Google it, okay? And he will Google continuous delivery, and he will find multiple references to continuous delivery. And CDF's continuous delivery is going to be a little bit different from the rest of the articles that he will find. And the same way, if he or she, of course, Google continuous deployment, it's again will be a different, like what the CDF is suggesting about or talking about continuous deployment will be a little bit different from all the rest of the articles that he'll find. So in my point of view, in order to reach out to others with our information and to adopt, like engagement and collaboration, I think it's better to use the same terminology, even if it's a bit, I don't know if it's frustrating or, it's limiting or whatever. It's just for the sake of being present in the same place where the others, everybody else is.
I'm a little bit confused by this argument because it's the other way around, and that's why we did it the other way around, is because we've gone with the dominant usage. So I think maybe there's some confusion here, but that was some work we did a couple of years ago now that led to that outcome. And there's a reason why we're the Continuous Delivery Foundation and not the Continuous Deployment Foundation. It's that's the common usage is for the methodology to be continuous delivery. But well, yes, I know that there are certain holdouts in some areas who do have the inverse usage, but it's not the commonest utilization nowadays.
But holy moly, like 18 months ago, there was a whole nother thing around. It's like what CD is like the new Vim versus Emacs. I swear to God.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the new girl in town, right? So maybe I don't have this context that you have. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. So now I'm going back to the real topic.
I suspect we'll never fully stop talking about this particular issue. Honestly, it comes up about once a year.
So every time that there is a new person in town, he raises this topic, right?
Uh-huh. Well, it's because nothing on the internet ever dies. So it depends on which blog post you find first. That sets the whole course of your understanding.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right that there are some critical pieces in this that are almost anti-patterns in being successful with some of these things. And if people get the wrong end of the stick early in their learning journey, it almost guarantees that they're going to fail. And so, almost the defining characteristic of this SIG is in trying to provide good quality information to people to help them avoid the bigger pitfalls that exist on this journey. And so that's what we've been trying to spell out with all of this documentation is, here's the best way to think about this conceptually in order to maximize your chances of actually getting the outcome that you're seeing other people get. And we're trying to dispel a lot of myths and also make explicit some of the anti-patterns so that people can avoid going down a rabbit hole that doesn't take them to where they think they're going.
Okay, so thank you again, Terry. So my question will be, the next question will be a simple one, okay, which is, maybe you explained, Terry, but maybe I didn't understand because of the English and stuff. So I will ask it very, very bluntly, the question. I'm hoping that I can get that a little bit better. Terry, I'm seeing that I'm making you
bring
laugh. Okay, I'm bringing it now. I'm coming. So what is our target? What do we want to achieve in
So
this SIG? What do we want to achieve?
So we have several work streams going on at the moment, but where we are right now is working on the reference architecture, and this should be familiar to you. This is the TOGAF model for architecture. So
TOGAF? Never heard of the term.
So TOGAF is the Open Architecture Group architectural framework. So it's the Open Group architectural framework. So it's the definition of what an architecture is, and a standard methodology for defining an architecture in order to address a problem. So it's basically 500 or 600 pages of detailed, here's all the things that you need to do to define an architecture, and all the things that you could possibly get wrong, and all the trouble you could get into if you do that. So it's a great platform, and it's usually the standard reference in most enterprises when it comes to defining enterprise architectures. So you'll find that each of these pieces is basically a chapter in a reference definition that tells you all of the processes that sit within that Now, to date, we have done the preliminary and architecture vision phases, and those pieces are published on the website.
Your
What
audio
we
is
need
getting
to
weird
do
again,
next-
Terry. Just warning you.
Yeah.
So, give me a sec. Let me. Okay, that should be better now.
Ah, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So what we need to do next is address the section called business architecture, which within the TOGAF methodology is about understanding what are the business drivers for this system change. So why are we changing the business and the way we do things? And so it's defining all the pieces associated with what you need to think about in order to do the business change before you start to spend any money on infrastructure or technology or software development.
Another way, if you're an engineer and you want to influence your leadership that this is a worthy investment, what are tools that you can use to help make those justifications? Or if you are in that leadership position, understanding the business benefits of making that investment, because it is an investment, right? If you're starting, as many of our companies that we are aware of are, like, they're so far behind in some ways, the amount of investment is going to be commensurately large to try and catch up, right? If you're still local data center, you haven't thought about containerization, you may or may not even be using VMs yet. You may not have good automated testing investment. Like, all of that is going to require significant effort. So how do we, regardless of what entry point you're coming into, you know, engineer, exec, whatever, can you see the value proposition that would influence your willingness to take this step, right? And so it's kind of bringing not just the technical benefits, but the strategic business benefits as well, because that's a big part of the narrative.
Yeah, and
So-
go ahead.
So I understand this topic, but I will ask again the why question in the 5 whys. Like, why are we doing that? Like, again, like, I understand, like, if I am a DevOps person in an organization and I want to bring to the organization, to the business, whatever, the approach of continuous delivery, and to make the business to adopt the continuous delivery pattern, culture, practice, whatever, how it's called, doesn't really matter. So is like, whether I am expected to go to CDF website to find the information and to learn from this, like a knowledge-based website, so that I can bring to my leaders, to the leadership of my organization, the information, so they take the right decision, which is adopting continuous delivery. Did I understand that correctly?
So we're providing a resource to help with that process, but the specific challenge that we're trying to address at the moment is that this is one of those methodologies that has certain prerequisites, and so what we're seeing in industry at the moment is that a small subset of organizations are very, very successful with continuous delivery, and it is accelerating them into being very high performing, very high growing organizations. And then the vast majority of organizations are failing to successfully implement any sort of continuous delivery process. And what the defining characteristic is, that the organizations that are successful are driven by a different commercial mindset and model to the ones who are trying to approach this as if it was an engineering discipline. So in order to be successful with continuous delivery, you actually have to have in place the commercial and business change to enable you to succeed before you stand any chance of actually getting this to work in practice. And so what we're trying to do with this piece of work is make that really, really blindingly clear to people, so that they understand that they should not attempt continuous delivery unless they have board level buy-in to this as organizational change, and that they're going to get commitment from all of the teams within the organization to modify their business processes to enable the organization to do continuous delivery. Because continuous delivery is an organizational level process. It's not an engineering level process. And so if you start by implementing it in your engineering team, you spend a lot of money, and then you still can't deliver anything at the right cadence, because everything that needs to go into production needs a 6-month sign off from legal and marketing and sales and half a dozen other teams that are not operating to a continuous delivery cadence. So you have to unblock all those things up front, and that's a big piece of work that requires a lot of C-suite commitment to push it through. before you can hope to succeed with the engineering level pipeline stuff.
So do we want to make them like be how would I say that? I'm trying to find the nice words. Do we want to help those dev folks or those leaders, whoever, to be afraid to take this decision because it's like it's a very complicated process to adopt? Or do we like I'm a bit confused, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
what we're doing is just spelling out exactly what that decision looks like, and what tools you need at each stage in order to make good decisions.
Okay, let's hear Tara for a second. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, like, one of the really interesting things that I often heard. I was at Google before I was at MongoDB, and this has come up quite a bit, which is, everybody is like, oh, okay, we're going to go do this continuous deployment, continuous delivery thing. We go buy Accelerate, we read through it, we look at all the capabilities, and then it's like, well, now what, right? And the number of places that are approaching it, as Terry put it, from the engineering perspective, and then subsequently fail, it generates a lot of churn, and kind of this failure cycle, because you can read the book and go, okay, well, I don't know what to do about the cultural stuff, which is a huge part of the capabilities list that Dora defines. So we're just going to focus on the things we understand, which is the technical. Oh, shoot, it didn't work, right? I mean, I literally sat in customer where they were on round 3 of trying to implement continuous delivery in their system, and they were going to fail again, and I told them that. And so it's, how do you, I guess the thing that I have looked at this project at is, can we make the Dora principles and capabilities more meaningful in a way that you can understand how it impacts the decisions that you're going to make towards execution in that direction, right? If you, classic anti-pattern, right? I've seen it many times. We're going to do continuous delivery. We're going to hire a DevOps team, and they're going to make that work for us, right? And then they're like, well, we hired these engineers. Why didn't it work? Right. Well, I think anybody who has gone through this migration process understands, well, of course, that's not going to work, because one team off on the side is not going to enable the cultural changes necessary. They don't probably have the authority. The leadership isn't willing to make the commitments of change as far as how we strategically plan our roadmap that incorporates the ideas of how things are delivered and incremental changes and automated testing, like all that other stuff, right? It's like, no, what we're talking about is actually something that's really hard. And we want you to understand what you're getting into so that you will be successful when you finally do it. I don't think anybody's actually pulled that off yet, right? So maybe this is a truly Sisyphean task, but who else is going to try it, right?
Well, I admit that I'm looking at the problem domain from a totally different point of view.
There are so many, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure, and this is okay that we don't have the same opinions, because when there are like diverse opinions, then the best outcomes come through. So I'm totally fine with folks that are not thinking like myself, and I'm thinking a little different from others. So one is that I don't think that there is someone that can say that continuous delivery is not a good practice. Okay, there's so many benefits for that, and lots of organization wants to adopt that, but they're probably don't understand what it's been, or they think that it's very complicated, or there is not enough information. And if there is information provided, okay, then it's seems very, very difficult, very, very complicated. And like, wow, who wants to commit to such a decision that looks very, very like not alarming, it's not the right word, but like huge, right? It's like a huge something, and like you need a lot of resources, probably manpower, probably dollars to put into the process of doing this change, and it's hard, and companies don't like to do huge like changes, right? It's like a consider that like a airplane carrier. It's a huge ship that there is in the sea, and it doesn't know how to turn fast to the opposite direction, right? It knows how to do very small incremental changes, one step at a time, in order to do the 180 turn. So in my point of view, after investing some time in understanding the lean software practice, I think that instead of like showing this very huge, complicated task, let's breaking it down into little tasks that at the end of this journey, it's like a journey. And at the end of the journey, you will get this continuous delivery adopted in your organization. But the first step will be, I don't know, for instance, I'm giving here examples. Let's say implement an effective CI. Second step would be implement your quality gates service that can track the results of the quality gates in different environments. See that you have like a very structured environments in place, dev environment, CI environment, various testing environments, staging environment, production environment, stuff like that. And moving forward, you know, like, and each step might be very easy to implement. And if organization sees only the next step to implement, like the next iteration, right? So like whatever fits into an iteration, which is a small encapsulated step, looks pretty easier to implement, then why not do that? We don't need so many leaders to say, yes, we are committing to this step, because it's, you know, it's like.
So this is an approach that we see as the default in most organizations. And it's kind of known as the how hard can it be approach.
I have to jump off, but I would really like to continue this conversation in the future. So I'll hopefully see you next time.
I need to go as well. So let's wind this up. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. It was very good discussion. Thank you, Terry.